Okay. Let's see here. I was going to check a few cables. I thought I'm just going to go ahead and start recording. I don't really have a plan here. I am going to go ahead and plug up my iron just to get it going. This bench here at which I'm working is one I just put together a few days ago, so I still find myself like looking around like, oh, where did I set tools and stuff. But so I'm draping my cable off just a little bit there to kind of keep it oriented. So this is heating up, and I guess it goes without saying it's it's gonna get hot here in a second. So I definitely don't want to bump it with my hand or risk letting it drop off on the floor. So here's just a cable. I have a box. Whenever I'm doing sessions, if I ever pull out a cable and plug up a mic and it doesn't work, I don't have time to mess with it. I just take the cable, roll it up, throw it aside. And I have a box that's just a collection of those cables, and every so often I start realizing that, hey, I need more cables. So I go back to the box and start fixing and checking, and sometimes it just turns out it was a fluke. But anyhow, before I do anything, I thought you might want to see the anatomy of a cable. Let me get my light set up well. So if I were to strip back, an average mic cable, what you're going to have inside are two wires side by side, this red and yellow. Each one, and they may be different colors, so don't worry about the colors, but you're going to have one that is sheathed in one color, one that sheathed in another color. They both carry the signal, but one carries it inverted, and that's how balance cables work. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to explain it, but this is how a balance cable is set up. Now, wrapped around the outside of those guys, I don't have the full-size strippers here. I've got another set of strippers. I think they're out in my other bag right now. But they basically, you put them on here and they just simply tear the outer jacket away. But I just did a little strip, pulled this back, and you see this wire is just kind of wrapped around these other two wires, just a mesh. And this is the shield. So it's actually a mesh all the way around the rest of this cable to the other end, and we use it to ground anytime there's a neutral or common or ground or whatever term is being used for the implementation. This is what we're referring to, this outer piece of wiring. And then these two are our signal cables. So if I just got a fresh cable and I was going to be getting this thing set up, what I would need to do is first take off the jacket however far back I need to. Again, this isn't the proper size for this particular setup. I've been doing this a while, kind of, you get a feel for how to use the tools. And essentially I'm scoring it all around to where it's enough to where I should be able to just kind of break it and then slide it off. I pull back all of my excess cable. There's this cloth that they put in here too. It helps with I think for the tensile strength. Just a little bit of physical strength for the cabling itself. So you're not stretching the wires when they pull. So I get all that mesh and I just go ahead and twist it up, right? So now I've got my mesh here, and I've got these two wires, and depending on how long they are, I would trim them accordingly and then strip them. In this case, I just take that last little bit and I've removed some, and that's probably too much for what for using on an XLR. So if I were about to I'll just get into doing some here and I won't explain it till it's time. This one's pretty much prepped to go for most projects. I would trim it back a little as necessary so I don't have too much. I used to trim off like way too much, but the more you get used to doing just what you need, the better it seems to hold up. It's not just more professional looking, it actually, the final product's better if you only cut things to the right, only as much as you need. Okay, so throw this away. Let's grab a cable. I don't have any ends with me right now, so I'm going to punt on this one. I'm not sure what was half cable. Okay, so this cable's in the bin. It's obviously, I don't know who, it looks like one person made it, another person fixed it. One of those people probably being me. These are the end connectors here. XLR connectors. Male, female. The male plugs into the female. That's how all connectors work. Now, if you look down inside of these, I don't know if I can even get an angle to where you can see it with the light and the camera and all this stuff, but what you get are numbers on each of those connectors, those prongs. 1 is the shield, 2 is the signal, and 3 is the inverted signal. I think that's how that goes. It's been a minute since I've unpacked them, so we can find out here in just a second. These are just a beautiful example because we have two different types, two different styles of connectors. So first thing I would do, a tester. One thing I don't like about this tester is it doesn't immediately beep. It's like a half-second delay. So over here you see there's numbers again. I don't know how well they show up on this video, but again, there's a 1, a 2, and a 3, and they correlate to this 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to go into 1. My eyes are just not that good. And check 1. Okay, I'm seeing a reading on the meter over there. Okay. I'm just not holding it very steady, I think is the problem. Okay, so I'm going to say that's good for now. Let's just move on to number 3, which is this middle pin. Okay, and number 2. Come on, number 2. Okay, this is reading like it's a good cable. So my suspicion is when I used it last, I was getting a bad connection on plugging it up for whatever reason, or I was getting something was wrong with another device. So I'm going to say that this cable is good for right now, but I am going to go ahead and show you the insides of it. So this one, this is Whirlwind, makes this one, and Switchcraft makes this one. These are kind of old. I don't like using these. They have these little screws on here to take them apart. They're just fiddly. But essentially, we want to take everything on the inside apart using these. And if I remember correctly, these are actually reverse threaded on one of them. Maybe that one. Let's see. Yeah, it's reverse threaded. So I'm lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. If I lefty-loosey, the screw actually goes deeper into the chassis. It's actually loosening it up, but loosening for this means breaking these apart. It'll make more sense in a second. I'll quit talking. Okay. Okay, you can see I've screwed these little set screws out. I don't have to take them all the way out. I should be able to just break them free. And they are easy to lose because they're itty bitty. Am I forgetting something? I haven't messed with a Switchcraft connector in so long. I may be forgetting something outright. I'm going to go ahead and take them all the way out just so they're not part of the equation. Holy cow. That dude is snug. Okay. Okay. Sheesh. Alright, so this is that reverse thread. So whenever I loosened it, I turned left to go loosen it, actually went deeper in. And this is why, because in order for this piece to get set in here, is you slide it in, which is so difficult, but I slide it in until this set screw's lined up here, and then I tighten it, I turn it right, and it actually comes out, and that locks it into place, keeps it from sliding around. And then these little set screws here hold all this, the frame inside. It pinches down on the cable so that when you pull, it's not pulling on your solder joint, it's pulling on the actual cable. Oh, this is just a fat cable is all it is. Now somebody has, I'm going to say me probably, because this was literally like 20 years ago since I last opened this up. Must have, I don't know why I put tape on there. There's no telling what I was doing. Now it's all gummy. But the solders look good. I was probably afraid of it grounding out on a different cable by accident. So signal cable here, signal cable here. That is on 2 and 3. I don't know if you can see them, but this little guy here is number 2. That's number 3. So we've got a signal and inverted signal. I believe that's, I'll have to look. But anyhow, it doesn't matter. As long as they're consistent, that's all that matters. Now, again, number 1 is the shield guy here. Yeah, I don't know why I put that tape on there. I guess I just had some loose wires and I wanted to keep them from shorting out. But if I was putting this together, sorry, this is like the worst video I've ever made. If I were making this from scratch using this connector, one of the things you have to keep in mind is you put this on the cable very first. And then you cut the ends and then you do all your soldering. I've done so many projects where I've gotten in here and stripped my wires and soldered everything up, and then I realized, oh, I forgot to put the actual chassis on there first. So then I've got to cut everything apart, undo it, and start from scratch. So think about what all needs to be on the cable first before you get to soldering. So I'm going to pretend we just soldered this up. It's all connected, and then I just slide this back up the cable. It's kind of tough. Wow. And slippery. If it's not slippery, it's sticky. Okay, now I'm about to put the pins, that little section down in here. There's a key right here on the edge of it to make sure you're oriented. I'm trying to spin it in the light. So I get this sort of lined up. And it's just a fat jacket on this cable. And if it doesn't go very easily, you definitely don't want to pull too hard and tear up all your hard work. Okay, so it's sliding down in there. I'm just going to go until I see that set screw get in line with the hole. My goodness, that is tough. Okay, now my set screw is in line. I'm going to turn it right. And in doing so, it came out, and that set it in there. Oh my goodness. This is why I hate these Switchcrafts, I guess. I mean, they're fine. They work fine. I have a friend of mine who was, he runs in bigwig circles in the studio world, and he gets a lot of endorsements, and he had this high dollar, I think Mugami gold cables that since he was endorsed, they just gave them to him. And he got together some buddies of his who are all platinum producers, and he's like, I want to do a cable shootout. And he took his gold Mugami cables out, hooked up some audio gear, and then he took out some wire coat hangers. He didn't tell them what he was doing. He said, okay, I want you to listen to these speakers through the through wires A, my Mugami. And they all listened. Said, okay, that's great. He says, now listen to these speakers through my other brand. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And all the producers preferred his other brand of cables. And after the fact, he showed them his cables, and they were just wire coat hangers. The point is that if it works, it works. Don't buy into brands and stuff. Now, these, I really like these Whirlwinds, how they're set up. That's just so much easier there. I'm going to put it back together so you can see. So, this guy back here, the back of the plug, the male is the same way. You just spin this guy. Sometimes they'll click. This one's not clicking. But I slide this back. That just pops off. And there's this kind of bullet-shaped apparatus here. And what that is you see it's tapered on the end. Whenever I tighten it up and spin that, it's actually pushing up on that taper and clamping the cable. So, real basic principle. And I've done the same thing with the taping here. I must have been, I don't know what was going on. What I'm doing with I was just protecting, I was afraid of the tape. Yeah, that's all it is. And I didn't have any heat shrink. Yeah. So sometimes when these, on this one, all this loose wiring here, if this starts to break, it may still get a good connection, but one of these broken wires will just kind of fray off and then touch another wire. So all your connections are still good, but they're shorting out. You're actually getting connections you don't want by virtue of the shield, in this case, reaching out and touching another wire. And that's just as bad as a broken cable. So let's go back to the testing. That's something I didn't mention. That's a very critical thing. So whenever I test, and let's say I'm going in number 1, the shield, I should get it a beep, continuity beep whenever I touch 1 over here. Okay, that's great. But I should not get a beep on anything else. So I was touching the edge. Okay. So getting connections you want, equally important, you want to test for connections you don't want. So I've checked 1 is not touching 3 or 2, so now I'm going to go into slot 3 and see, make sure it's not touching 2. And of course, we already tested this connection here. Oops. Okay. And another thing that could have happened is that there could be like corrosion or dirt on some of those pins, and that's why it didn't work. But this seems to be a good cable. I was probably just in the middle of a session, pulled it out, didn't work, and threw it in the box, and it maybe immediately found out, oh, it wasn't the cable, it was a microphone or a preamp or something wasn't plugged up right. So you can see that's just gonna slide up through there. Got to get it all lined up. There's a little key on this little bullet shaped thing too. So I've got to get it all in line. I don't think there's a perfect connector, but in my experience, this style is probably the easiest to work with. Man, it's hard to get those little keys lined up. I hope you're watching this on fast speed. Okay, got that key lined up, that key lined up. Why am I not going all the way up in there? What's happening? Okay. I think the little latch was in the way. So I've got all that going there. It should go fairly freely. I come up here, and again, that tapered area that's barely sticking out, as I tighten this, it's going to make it clamp down. So this guy's going back into rotation. I guess I prematurely heated up my iron, right? I just threw it across the room so I could see it, which is now broken it, I'm sure. But those look like good solder joints, so I think they're good. So let's see what cable we have. Yeah, okay. Put those in the floor. This one I was using on channel 9. When you start getting into a lot of tracks in the studio, here's something I would have never figured out if I didn't work at a nursery, was these little plant tags are awesome in the studio. You can mark your cables really quickly as to where they're going, and they hang on the edge of a mic stand really quickly. Silly hack there. So let's test this one. Before we do anything, I'm going to test it. This might not turn into a soldering video today at all. I'm looking for the numbers to see if you can read them on this one. It's number 1. Yeah, barely see it. So number 1, which is my shield. Number 1 over here. Okay, we're good. I'm going to make sure it's not connecting with 2 or 3. Okay, we're good. So I'm going to put this into number 3. Okay, that intermittentness might be the reason this landed in the fix-it pile. Oh, hey, number 2 is not getting squat on it. Make sure I'm on the right contact. Number 2. Yay, we found a broken cable. Okay, now it's usually one of 3 things: a bad solder on this end, a bad solder on this end, or a broken cable somewhere in here. So those are the 3 things to look at. So I'll do this for slating the video. So now what we have for this one is a cable that's not reading on pin 2. I'm going to double check number 2. None of these pins should be reading right there. Okay. Yay, it's broken. Screw off the end. After you do this a time or 2, it goes pretty fast, you know. Okay. Slightly different than the one we just looked at, but still the same concept. It's got this kind of bullet-shaped pinch. Now let's look at all of our connections here. They all look pretty good. Those previous ones you saw where I had put tape on there, this is the proper way to do it. Somebody put shrink wrap so that all those frayed wires, if they do break free, they don't come over here and touch. So I'm going to test. Where are we on number 2? Wow, this just double checking myself. Okay. Okay, I'm getting a connection there. Okay. So I'm going to try to find double check. Okay, yeah, I'm still making contact. So now this is one of those cases where I might be better off incorporating my little third hand tool to hold things steady for me. And putting a clamp on there so I'm not fiddling around. So I'm going to clamp effectively now. This red cable is going to number 2. So I should be able to get see, that should be making contact. Oh, it's not. Okay, well, I'm going to move ahead. I'm going to pull off this other end, pull off the male. Okay. Get a little jammed in there. I don't like to pull too hard. It should come out relatively easily. Looky there. Wow, that's a cold-hearted break. Okay, there's a couple of things. Oh, this is great. This is a perfect example. Okay, look here. Number 2, the wire itself is just missing. Just gone, right? Where is it? It's just right here. It doesn't break off and disappear or anything. It actually retracted. I've seen this a few times. Wires can stretch and they can twist, and if you've got 2 wires of the same length and the cable gets moved a lot, and it, like, you know, these, like, each finger's a wire, and as it gets moved they get wrapped or something, you know, and now this one's effectively a little shorter because it's been twisted over the years, or somebody pulled on it and this one held on but this one broke free and it pulled back, and then there's still tension on both of them, but it wasn't enough to break this solder joint. So whenever the tension went away, this one, even though it might have kind of pulled in some, it pulled back out, but this one had no external force. It's just a good description. So what I would like to do here is actually strip it all back and get a nice fresh cut again. This one all looks pretty good, so before I go any further, I'm going to pack it back up to prevent further damage. Okay. Make sure I'm not cross-threading. Okay. What is she watching in there? Oh my goodness. Okay. So okay, now this is, we need to really remember to make sure we don't swap up 1 and 2. So 2, so 1 to 1, 3 to 3, 2 to 2. That's how they match up, right? Okay. And just as a matter of helping out, even though I know these things, I always double check myself, because it's so easy to forget that if you're on male or female, or, you know, there's no reason to think more than you have to. I'm just putting that there while I plug up my iron, get it going. I'm going to use my third hand tool and grab number 2. Gink. Okay. So I know that this is number 2. They're in line with one another. That's just to help me think through it. Remind me. Okay. Let's prep the cable. I'm just kind of getting all the slack out of it. Now I'm cutting off the shield. I'm trying not to bite all the way down to the actual mesh. I don't want to break any of that mesh cabling. Oh. That is. There's another tool that I have that I guess I should have just brought inside. But I'm going to operate under the assumption you don't have that tool either, so I'm going to do it old school. Now, right now, you saw me pulling and stretching all that stuff. So what's effectively happened is I've moved that shield around. If I let it sit here and relax some, these may retract or pull out or something, you know. So I don't want to get anything too tight inside of there in case it's still relaxing. So I'm pulling on my mesh. There's another difference from the previous cable. This one doesn't have that that cotton string in there. I'm winding all this up. Oh, I did miss a wire. That would have been a showstopper there. Okay, so this is like way too much wire for what I need. Okay, now it's key to note that I already have this on. This piece is already on the cable. If I were starting fresh, that's the first thing I'd have to do. This bullet piece you can put on after the fact because it has a split in it. So I can now pop it on there, but it might be easier to go ahead and get all this stuff loaded up. And it's just a good, or what do you call it? Just good practice for discipline purposes. All right. So now I've left some of my old wiring on there, so I know that the red one's going to go there and this one is going to go here, and that's number 2. So if I had cut all those off of there, I'd be like, oh wait, which one was number 2 red or number 2 white? I could just test the other end and find out pretty quickly. So I should be able to test this wire, which is not a bad idea. Make sure the cable itself is good. So that's number 2, and I should be able to come here. Hey, it's still a good cable. Might as well test them all while I'm here again. Hey-oh, why am I not getting... Oh. Okay, let me go number... Oh, I was on the wrong one. No wonder. Number 3. Huh. I don't know if there's enough wire sticking out of there to test it. Strip it back. Okay, number 3 is good. They're not cross-talking to anything. And then I'm going to number 1, the shield. Okay, the cable's good all around. Tea time. Okay, so I want to get probably about that much cable. You know, about a centimeter, centimeter and a half, something like that. You don't want a lot of excess in there. When in doubt, cut it a little long. You can always cut it shorter later, right? Set those aside. They're trash. Now, this jacket, this outer thick jacket here, I don't want too much. I don't want to get too far away, because whenever I package all this up, it's going to grip. This thing's going to squeeze and grip that jacket. So if I strip back to here, it'd be pointless. That's what I was saying. You only want to really strip off what you really need to. I probably could have left those a little longer, but that'll be fine for what we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and strip it. Just going to give myself, it doesn't take much. I mean, you can see how thin the wire is. There's not really that much. When you're stripping too, you don't want to have to pull too hard at this point, because what will happen is you'll pull, which likely would happen, this got pulled really hard, stretched out, and they cut it everything to length, put it together, and this started to retract. And popped off. Okay, so I've got all this ready to go. I should chapter this video so you don't have to sit through all my waxing on. Okay, so let's actually do some soldering. Some old solder here and hairs and stuff. It doesn't take much. I mean, just a little bit. So I'm just kind of, a lot of times I can't even tell that there's solder on there when I'm done. It's just got it sort of a dull patina to it when I'm done. And that lets me know. So for me, aside from the flux itself, the principal concept, the game changer for me on soldering was, I used to do this number here. I'd get a bunch of solder on here, which you should, go ahead and tin your iron. Try not to breathe any more than you have to. Get some on there. Get that off for now. You want to keep that clean. But before you solder, you usually tin your wire. And I used to put it on my iron and then try to like put that little blob onto the wires. And really, the thing to do is heat up where you're going to be putting your solder, and draw the solder into it. So I'm heating up my wire and then just touching it. It shouldn't take a second. Copper is highly conductive. I'll spin this one over so you can hopefully see it. Get it in the light. GoPros are not great for just really close up, unless you're like way up in it. Hang on, cable. Okay, maybe that's enough light. So I'm going to get it hot, and then, okay. So if you can see, I didn't touch all of it with solder, but it sucked the solder up everywhere. Part of that's the heat, part of it's that flux making it happen. So now, if this comes undone, it won't fray out. It's got solder everywhere, except for that one little wire that I... Okay. And I can also put some heat shrink on that too when I'm done. Give it its own jacket. In fact, I'll just for the sake of seeing it. Heat shrink usually comes in a package like this. You can, all these different diameters. This is pretty much going to be the smallest one I've got. Okay. I don't need that much. Put the excess in there. So now I'm going to take my little heat shrink. Good grief, I can barely see. Might make it a little shorter, actually. This is to replace that janky tape solution we saw earlier. Okay. So I'm just going to use my soldering iron. Heat this bad boy up from all directions. A lighter works really well. Just kind of wave a flame underneath it and it really engulfs it. So now it's bam. It looks professional. It is professional. This is all prepped. This is ready to go. It's stripped to length. They're all tinned. All that kind of stuff. Now, over here, I'm just going to memorize this for now. 2 is clear. Red is 1 is red. And that makes sense because 1 should be signal and 2 should be the inverted signal. I'm sorry, I said that totally wrong. 2, 3. 2, 3. Ignore everything I just said. I just confused myself by the way I phrased it. Because 1 is the shield. But 2 is going to go there. Now we need to get these old wires off. So this is where the old solder sucker comes in to save the day. Watch it not save the day today. God, my vision's so bad. Okay, so I'm going to get my iron in here. If you do a lot of soldering, this is when you want to have different bits to get, different type of applications. You might find it benefits you. But I just need to get that hot enough to melt the solder that's on there. And it sucks it up. If you look down in there, it's pretty clear. It took out almost all the solder. And usually what happens is, let's see if the plug comes out. Yeah, just a little chunk of solder popped out. It cooled off really quickly and turned into a chunk. And I'm just going to go around and remove all the ones that need to be gone. So number 1, that red one. I've got it, my plunger is down. I've got my thumb on the button. Treat every plunger as if it was loaded. Only aim at what you intend to plunge. Alright, so sucked off all that solder. That's poor phrasing. I'm gonna get this one. Come on, iron. Am I not getting you to the right spot? Yeah, I am. Yeah. Now, if you see, I try to be quick when I get in there. These tips end up melting off from doing that. So every now and then you have to replace that tip. So we're pretty good now. Really good. And if you'll see here, the way these are made, there's a wire that's going to end up getting resoldered, and it's still there. It goes from here over to there. And this just grounds that shield to the actual chassis. Just make sure all that's touching. Alright. So after a whole lot of ado, let's double check. We've got this is on the cable, because we can't put it on after the fact. This is on the cable, which we could put on after the fact. We've cleared out all of our areas. We've got it all trimmed to fit, so it's time to start. I don't know how well you can see the they're kind of scooped out. It's like a pipe. So this right here is hollow. It's just a tube that's been tapered at the end, but it's hollow back here. And one side it's scooped out so that I can solder it kind of like at this angle if I want to, and it's going to pool down in there. I can put my wire in there and then apply my solder, and then it's buried in there. I used to think that I needed to have like, a gallon of solder in each joint to make it strong, and that's not really the case. Just a dab will do you, as long as you do it right. Number 2 is going to go right there. This is where you might want to use some needle nose or something so you don't burn your fingertips, or, so this is still kind of warm, bring in ye old third hand tool to hold things in place for you. Or, call your buddies up and say, hey, I need you to come hold wire while I solder. Even heat aside, sometimes it's nice to use needle nose at this point just because you get so much control getting down there. Get fat fingers out of the way. Okay, so that's in position. I am going to get a little flux on the job, and solder. light here. A janky lamp. Did I even get the solder in there? I think it all went to my iron because I didn't get my... Yeah. Let me get a better position on this. Well, it did solder there. I don't like that. I'm going to redo it in a minute, but I'll let it work to our advantage for the moment. Number 1 is going to go there. So let me turn it to where that side is up. If you do this a whole lot too, I've got a buddy of mine who has like a little jig, and all it does is just holds this at the right location so he can spin it around and do all that. But for people like me who do it every few months, it's not really worth the time just yet. Okay. I'm going to go in here and heat up the location, the site of the surgery. Oh, that's beautiful there. Give it a second to harden. My eyesight's not that good, but used to, I would watch it. I could see it would like the sheen would go from this perfect kind of liquid look to it, and then suddenly like gloss over with a slight matte finish, and I could tell that it had cooled off enough to move it, but I can't see that detail anymore. But that right there, perfect little bead. I don't want to be too rough. Yeah, it's still hot. But if I've done a good job, I shouldn't be terribly worried about breaking the joint by just a little bit of moving around. So I'm going to get that wire that grounds from here to there is kind of in my way. I would like to put my new piece in behind it. There we go. Perfect. Just a little bit of solid flux in there. Don't want to get too much. I'm going to heat up the site and then put in my oh, that one looks really good. So let's go fix that first one. I know this all sounds super time consuming, but doing it like I'm doing it now, like I sit down, I get all my tools out, and I kind of get a rhythm going, and I could crank through a bunch of these because I've got all my tools out finally, and I'm not explaining things. I'm going very a little bit more deliberate today than I normally would, I suppose. Okay, that's all getting hot. So I'm going to pull that away using these. Let it cool off enough to where it's get a little light on the subject. I'm going to suck some of that solder out. Oops. Got a little gun shy there. And I could feel my tip on my irons a little loose from when I took it off a while ago. I don't have to use these to tighten it for snugness. It's just so I wouldn't burn myself. But as long as the iron's cool, you should be able to tighten it up enough by hand. Right. That's just a little bit on the long side. I think the that to where it's pressing in of its own accord so that I'm not trying to do two things at once while I'm soldering. There we go. All right. Take two. I'm heating up the site and then getting the solder in there. That's probably more than necessary, but okay, I'm going to unplug my iron now because I don't know if I'm going to do any more today, but no sense sitting here and just heating up. Okay, so that looks pretty good. There's some plastic hanging off. Okay, all of those are now prepared and repaired, sorry, and look pretty good. I'm just making sure this little filament that I see is plastic and not wire. So, okay. Get a couple things out of the way here. I should have made a bigger desk. I'm going to have to put a different shelf on it here, I can already tell. So I'm going to clamp that and okay. So I'm wondering, there seems to be some sort of oxidization on the actual contacts on the actual prongs here, or somewhere it's not making a connection. I was going to use these alligator clips to make things easier, but I think they're actually going to give me false readings. So number one, am I touching it over here? Okay, number one's reading great, and it's not reading on 2 and 3. Number 3, okay, and number 2. Double check that it's not touching anywhere else. Okay, huzzah, we have a fresh cable there. And you know, depending on how precious your time is, it might be cheaper to go buy a cable, but I don't know, I enjoy doing it, and a lot of times I find if I go buy a product, knowing how to fix it, I can actually make it a better product. I've bought microphones before. They're good microphones, and the only thing different between the microphone that the cheap one and the more expensive one was just maybe a couple of soldering joints on the inside. Not the way they soldered it, but just there. One I'm thinking of in specific is this microphone. It's I think SHS makes, and it's just like an SM57, except that they didn't drip paraffin inside of it. So I got an SHS microphone, dropped some paraffin down inside of it. That took me like all of 5 minutes, and it was worth the extra $50 that I saved, you know. So there's now I've got another good cable, and that's it. It just, you know, we kind of hit everything, I think, on that particular fix. Again, iron, flux, usually comes with a nifty little brush. Solder, I'm using, where's this, if you can see it, 44 rosin core. It serves my purposes pretty well, and I've had this spool for decades. Handy, not necessary. Pretty necessary. Pretty necessary. Just makes life easier. All right. Well, I hope that wasn't too hard to watch.